All right, strap in everyone, because today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of TVO tractors.
TVO tractors.
You got it. Specifically, we're going to be looking at some sources that shed light on how these machines actually worked.
Interesting.
The whole fuel system, the challenges they faced, and maybe even uncover some DIY secrets along the way.
Sounds like a plan. I'm always up for a good mechanical mystery.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 1940s. You've just snagged yourself a shiny new Ferguson tractor ready to put it to work.
The classic Ferguson, a real workhorse.
Absolutely. But here's the catch. This bad boy runs on something called TVO.
TVO.
TVO tractor vaporizing oil.
Now we're talking. Not your everyday fuel, that's for sure.
You're telling me. Now, TVO, in its simplest form, is a mix of paraffin and petrol.
Paraffin, or kerosene as some folks know it.
Yeah, kerosene, the stuff you might find in a heater.
Exactly. It was cheap, readily available back then, perfect for, well, heating.
But not so much for running an engine, right?
Well, there's the rub. Straight paraffin just doesn't cut it when it comes to petrol engines.
What's the issue? Why not just fill her up with paraffin and call it a day?
Octane rating, my friend. Octane rating. Paraffin has a really low octane rating.
Meaning?
It doesn't burn as efficiently as petrol in those types of engines.
So you're talking engine knocking, overheating, all sorts of nasty stuff.
Bingo. You could seriously damage your engine if you tried running it on straight paraffin.
So TVO is basically a workaround, like a clever way to use this cheap and abundant fuel.
Spot on. By adding back certain elements, called aromatics, they could boost the octane of paraffin, making it suitable for these tractors.
Ingenious. So they essentially created a whole new fuel just to make things work.
It was more like fine-tuning an existing fuel to fit the need.
Okay, that makes sense. But this whole dual fuel system sounds pretty complicated for its time. What were some of the engineering hurdles they had to overcome?
One of the biggest challenges with paraffin is getting it to vaporize properly for combustion.
Vapor.
Yeah, paraffin needs to be heated up to a certain temperature before it turns into a vapor that can actually burn efficiently.
So it's not like just pouring it in and hitting the ignition?
Not quite. That's why these tractors had this ingenious two-tank setup.
Two tanks. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. How did that system work?
So you'd start the tractor on regular petrol from a smaller tank.
Just like a typical car, right?
Exactly. Get the engine nice and warm, then you'd switch over to the TVO, which was stored in a much larger tank.
So I'm imagining myself cruising down the road in this tractor, having to manually switch between these fuel tanks.
Yep, that was part of the routine. And it wasn't just about the tanks, they also had to modify the manifolds.
Manifolds? What do those have to do with anything?
Well, the manifolds were designed to help transfer heat from the engine to the TVO, warming it up for better combustion.
So they basically created this whole intricate system just to make use of a more readily available and cheaper fuel.
That's the gist of it. Resourcefulness at its finest, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But wait, there's more. One of our sources actually dives into a DIY recipe for TVO.
A DIY recipe. Now that's something I gotta hear.
It involves mixing petrol with something called second heating oil.
Second heating oil. Isn't that just another name for, well, kerosene?
Yeah, but usually a heavier grade, right?
You got it. Think of it like different grades of petrol. Same basic stuff, but slight variations.
And the key to this homebrew fuel is getting the ratio right.
Exactly. The ratio of petrol to kerosene determines the final octane level.
Which is crucial, as we've learned.
Absolutely. Too low and you risk damaging your engine. Too high and you're not getting the full benefit of the TVO concept.
Something that surprised me was that they say you can actually use unleaded petrol in these tractors.
Unleaded. Interesting. I thought those old engines needed leaded fuel.
Me too. But apparently the unleaded works just fine.
The lead in petrol was mainly there to prevent engine knock-in.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And in this case, the octane boost from the petrol itself is enough to do the trick.
So unleaded is fine, but just to be clear, diesel's a big no-no, right?
Absolutely. Diesel in a TVO engine is a recipe for disaster. No doubt about it.
Gotcha. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the consequences of using the wrong fuel.
This is where things get serious.
Our source mentions that it can really mess up the engine's lubrication system.
And they're not kidding. Think about it. You've got all these precisely engineered parts moving at high speeds inside that engine.
All relying on that thin film of oil to keep things running smoothly.
Exactly. And when you use the wrong fuel, or fuel that doesn't burn completely, you start getting all sorts of nasty deposits and acids building up.
So it's not just about performance hiccups, it's about long-term damage.
You nailed it. Those deposits contaminate the oil, basically stripping away its lubricating properties,
Waiting to.
increase friction, wear and tear, especially on vital parts like the camshaft. And eventually, well, you could lose oil pressure altogether.
And that's when things go really south, right?
You bet. Catastrophic damage to the crankshaft, maybe even total engine failure.
Not a pretty picture. It's mind-blowing how much ingenuity went into developing TVO and keeping those tractors chugging along during a time of fuel shortages.
A real testament to the resourcefulness of the folks back then.
But it also highlights how important it is to understand the science behind your fuel choices. I mean, we're talking the difference between a working engine and a busted one.
No doubt about it. The right fuel can make or break your machine.
So this brings us to a question for everyone listening. Looking back at the challenges and innovations surrounding TVO, what do you think the future holds for alternative fuels and engine designs?
Yeah, what kind of clever solutions will we come up with to power our world sustainably?
Head over to our social media and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear your take on this fascinating topic.
Always up for a good discussion.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya!